My name is Craig Johnson. I was married for 17 years to a woman who I thought loved me with all her being, Carolyn. So sue me, I'm a cuckold. She has been having an affair for about 6 years with her boss, who owns the real estate company where she works. We have 3 children, a 16-year-old girl and a 12-year-old boy. The third is a beautiful little girl who just turned 2 years old. I love them all, except for my wife. Oh yeah, before I forget, I'm a police sergeant. About 2 months ago, my youngest daughter fell at daycare and my wife was unavailable to pick her up. Dad rushes to the rescue. I jumped into my car with the lights flashing and rushed after her. She sucked on a lollipop and sniffed. I walked over and examined her, kissed her, and ruffled her hair. The elders couldn't stand it, but she likes it. I left her laughing and went to talk to the boss. She told me that Gidget fell and injured her calf quite badly. They called an ambulance, and it will arrive soon. I went and sat with my daughter, and soon she started laughing again. The ER doctor showed up and told her she should go to the emergency room to get stitches, so I escorted the ambulance to the emergency room. I tried to contact my wife, but the message went to voicemail. I sent a message and then launched the Latitude app because Linny kept losing her smartphone. The phone was smarter than my wife. It showed her at the Holiday Inn, just 7 miles away. I went and sat with my daughter while she was getting stitches. When she finished, we signed the forms. I went to the trunk and took out a folding child seat. I installed it in the back seat and fastened her seat belts. Then we went to look for her mother. My stomach started rejecting the food I ate for lunch. I pulled into the Holiday Inn parking lot and arrived just in time to see Carolyn and her boss, Arthur Dash, emerging from the lobby. They stood hand in hand, and his left hand rested on her ass. They laughed and smiled, and then she kissed him. You would have thought she was kissing me. It was just that kind of kiss. I stopped the big Ford and watched with the camera set to hard focus as they got to her Lincoln Aviator. She turned to him and kissed him deeply. His hand slid. Yes, slided, lifted her skirt so that I could see the top of her stockings. She then reached under the hem of her dress and pulled out her blue lace panties that I had given her for our anniversary. She smiled and gave it to him. It's over. I remembered my thoughts. They laughed, kissed again, and then she got into her car and drove away. Suddenly I saw brake lights and she skidded to a stop. Her car was parked, and suddenly my phone rang. I looked at the number and name. It was that same bitch. Hello, Carolyn. I answered in an even tone. What's happened? Where are you? I'm in the hospital. The baby is fine. Where are you? I couldn't reach your phone. I'm in the office. I'm on my way to the hospital now. Drive carefully, I said, hanging up. I watched her car as she called twice more. I let them all go to voicemail. She began to roll forward and nearly crashed into a pickup truck as she ran out into the street screaming. I grinned and headed home. I took out my phone, dialed my friend's number, and told him that I needed to talk to him. I drove up to the house and pulled the sleeping Gidget into the house. I went back to my car and grabbed 4 DNA swab kits. I went in and swabbed Gidget's mouth with a swab. I placed the tampon in the container, sealed it, and labeled the plastic bag. I went to get some iced tea and called work. I talked to my boss, the chief of detectives, and told him that I needed the rest of the week to take care of some family matters. Everything is fine? Yes, sir. I just need to see some doctors about my children. Okay, just keep me posted. I understand, boss. 20 minutes later, the slut rolled up. I felt physically ill when I saw her, but I took a deep breath and counted to 10. I only counted to 7 before she knocked on the door. Where is she? She screamed. I told her to calm down and that she was sleeping. She pushed past me into the child's bedroom. I started making a list of things to do tomorrow. Divorce lawyer, DNA test, electronics store. She came out of the bedroom and ran up to me. What's happened? She demanded. She fell. She is all right. She handled it like a soldier. There were only 4 stitches, and the doctor said that they would leave virtually no scars. She's fine, Carolyn. Why didn't they call me? She shouted at me. They tried, honey. They couldn't reach you. I have tried. The message went to voicemail. "So where have you been, darling?" She began to stutter and looked away. "I was at a meeting. I turned it off so it wouldn't interfere with the meeting. I suggest that instead of turning it off, you turn it on vibration. I'm just glad nothing serious happened to the kids, or maybe something fatal didn't happen to me." Her face clouded. Then she turned pale. "I never thought about it," she said. "Of course you didn't do this, dear," I thought to myself. With these words, two of our other children came running from school. Marisa, who is 16 years old, and Craig Jr., who is 12. They stopped in the living room and looked at their parents. "What happened, Dad?" asked my son. My beautiful daughter looked up at her mother with a cold gaze. "Is everything okay, Dad?" she asked. "Yes, your sister fell in kindergarten and cut herself. She had to go to the emergency room for stitches, and I went with her. I watched my wife." She shuddered. "Where have you been, Mom?" asked Marisa. "I was at a meeting," she muttered. Obviously, my daughter knew or suspected something. Junior, as we called him, looked intently at his mother. "Really, Mom?" he said. Carolyn fidgeted and blushed deeply. "I need to take a shower," she said. I couldn't resist. "Didn't you take it this morning?" I asked innocently. She stumbled and looked at me, trying to get me to spontaneously combust. "Deal with it, Craig," she hissed. She turned and went upstairs. I turned to my children and was surprised by their appearance. They were devastated and looked at me sadly. "Everything will be okay, guys, just a spat." "Whatever you say, Daddy," Marisa said. The younger one just shook his head. "How about pizza?" I asked. I called and ordered pizza. After 30 minutes, 2 large pizzas arrived, one with pepperoni, one with mushrooms. The children dug in, even little Gidget, and we waited for their mother. She appeared and raised her nose. "You know, I only like anchovies," she growled. "Then sue me," I said. She looked at me with a withering glance and went to pour herself some wine. The children giggled and cast sidelong glances at their mother. She rushed off somewhere, and the children and I recounted school events and social events, that is, dates and the like. It was cold between us that night, and I had to take another blanket. It's been about 3 months since we've been intimate. It would be even worse. The next day, I met with the lawyer and asked her what my options were. She hated cheaters, especially wives, and had a soft spot for police officers. But she told me that we were innocent, and no matter what, I would be raped unless my wife agreed to whatever I wanted. She told me to gather all the evidence I could, and we would see what we would see. She did say that in terms of child support, I was in decent shape because my wife made more money than I did. Also, because of her age, my eldest daughter could decide for herself who she wanted to live with. I went to a friend and asked him to set up surveillance for my wife and her friend. He was a good friend, and I had worked with him before. It wouldn't cost too much, and I'd have everything I needed. Then I went to an electronics store and bought several wireless voice recorders and 3 video cameras. I went home and installed cameras in my parents' bedroom, living room, and guest room. I put one of the tape recorders in her car, one in the bookcase in the living room, and one in the master bedroom. Then I received a message from my wife that she would be home late and that I should look after the children until she arrived. I got ready, went and picked up Gidget, and then went home to make dinner. About 2 hours later, my 2 oldest returned home and we discussed dinner. Grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and creamed spinach. "How does this sound?" I asked. Marisa said it sounded delicious. The younger one looked at me, grinned slightly, and asked, "What does Mom want?" I told him that Mom can cook her own dinner. Marisa and Junior looked at each other, and then Marisa said, "Dad, we need to talk." I decided that the riot act would be read to me. So we went into the kitchen and started dinner. She began, "Dad, I think Mom is cheating. She doesn't respect you, and she's never there when we need her." "Marisa is right, Dad. I'm glad they have the looks and the brains, no matter where they got them from." I stopped what I was doing and pulled them into a group hug. Their younger sister immediately joined us, shouting, "Me too! Me too!" I looked at my children and told them that I loved them more than I loved myself. I always told them this. They always thought it was corny, but they loved it. I told them it didn't look good and I was checking to see what their mother was doing. But know this, I will always love you. You are my children. We'll get through this. I promise. The younger one squeaked, I think you should give us cheek swabs, Dad. This might help in your case. It would never change how I feel about you, but it would be nice to know how damaged she is. The youngest is right, Dad. I want to know because right now I don't have much love for her. I was stunned, but I felt sorry for them. Okay, let's do this before she gets home. I took swabs from my cheeks and then mine. I sealed them and put them in my briefcase. The next day I went to an independent laboratory and asked them to do a rapid DNA test. It cost a little more, but I wanted it done as quickly as possible. After a week and a half, I received the results. None of the children were mine. Her company always hosted a 4th of July party at the owner's home. I really didn't want to go, but they told me I had to do it. She was one of the best wine salesmen in the company and had to show up. I had everything I needed on her and her lover: tapes, photographs, audio recordings, videos, and DNA results. I just couldn't think of a better way or time to do it. I realized that no matter what I did or when, I lost. And so I went. She said it wouldn't be a family event, so no children were invited. Looking back, I realize it was a blessing. We arrived a little after 11 a.m. and grabbed a couple of drinks, beer for me, white wine for her. She was wearing a yellow sundress, no bra, 7-centimeter espadrilles and a shawl. She looked good. I stayed fairly close to her, not exactly following her, but still following her. Her friend found her and chatted with her for a bit. He whispered sweet nothings into her ear and then continued to perform his duties as a host. He disappeared, and I immediately stepped up my surveillance of Carolyn. She continued to look around, and after the 3rd glass, she lost sight of me. She doesn't tolerate alcohol well, and was about 1 drink away from getting drunk. I watched as she grabbed another glass of wine and slid to the back of the long lot his house was built on. 2 of her friends from work tried to distract me, but I switched to Coca-Cola after half my bud. They were slightly tipsy, and I managed to keep an eye on her as she walked towards the corner of the garden shed and disappeared out the back door. I put my Coke on the table, took out my cell phone, and turned on the video camera. I moved to the corner of the barn, slid around it, left the area, and reached the gate at the back of the building. I looked around the corner and saw my wife. Her sundress was pulled down to her waist, and her breasts were exposed to the sun and breeze. The hem was pulled up, and he had her thoroughly, and she kept moaning and groaning. Her white lace panties were lying on the ground. It was like a light bulb went on in my head, and I thanked all that was holy for this good fortune. I turned off the camera and took a couple of still shots. I put my cell phone away, and as soon as I got to them, she was climaxing. He tensed and followed her, leaving them both breathless. I reached for his stupid-looking manly ass, spun him around and slammed my right hand into his face, destroying his nose and breaking his left cheekbone. I also managed to break something in my hand. He fell to the ground unconscious, and Carolyn slid down the wall of the barn and also sprawled on the ground. I pulled out my handcuffs and handcuffed him to a fence post while I read him his rights. You are under arrest for rape. You have the right to remain silent. If you waive your right to remain silent, anything you say may be used against you in court. Carolyn started screaming, Craig, what are you doing? You have the right to a lawyer. If you cannot afford to hire a lawyer, one will be assigned to you. Do you understand these rights as I have outlined them to you? Carolyn was already hysterical and struggled to get up. I took out my cell phone, dialed 911 and waited. 911, what happened to you? This is Detective Craig Johnson, badge 714. I'm at 6132 Larson Street and I have a rape suspect in custody. I need backup and a supervisor on site ASAP and an ambulance. Private residence, party in full swing. Carolyn was furious. It's not what you think. It's not rape, idiot. This is how it will happen, Carolyn. This is rape. I have video, audio, pictures, photographs, tapes, receipts, timelines of where you were, and DNA from our 3 children showing they are not mine. Are you going to go along with this, or are you never even going to look at your kids again, slut?" The blood drained from her face. She sank to the ground again and screamed, "No!" I picked her up and wrapped her in her shawl. "Decide, Caroline," she muttered. "My panties. You didn't need them 5 minutes ago. What makes you think you need them now? Leave them to the guys at the crime scene." I pulled her to her feet. She wailed, breathed rapidly, and sniffled. We shuffled across the back lawn to the patio. As we got closer, the 10 or so people milling around outside grew quiet, more shocked than not. They stepped aside, and I led her to an empty lounge chair and sat her down. Her 2 tipsy friends ran up to her and started screaming. "What's happened? What did you do to her?" "I did not do anything. Your boss raped her." "What?" Donna screamed. "You heard me," I said. "You did not know? You did not know?" Laura squealed. "Knew that?" I asked. "She said that she had an open marriage. She said you're fine with it." "She lied," I said. Just then, the cops arrived. I directed 2 officers down to the garden shed and told them to read the rights again, because I wasn't sure he heard me. The relief sergeant showed up with another patrolman, and I told the officer to take statements from Donna and Laura and their addresses. The asshole's wife pushed her way through the crowd and wanted to know what was going on. The sergeant explained that her husband had been arrested for rape, and someone had told her what happened. She exploded, "You slut!" She took off and tried to attack Carolyn, who by this time was almost catatonic. The cops detained her, and then the paramedics showed up. I told them what happened, and they put Carolyn on a gurney. When she stood up, she left a small puddle on the lounge chair. The cum ran down her leg, and she cried her eyes out. I told them to take her to the emergency room and have them check her for rape. Then 2 other cops brought Arthur in, his face swollen and his hands handcuffed behind his back. He made the mistake of saying they had a mutual understanding, and the intimacy was consensual. Unfortunately, his wife heard him and attacked him. "You son of a bitch!" They detained her again, and she said, "You will hear from my lawyer." I followed them into the department and signed all the forms because, after all, she was still my wife. I went to the station and laid out a complaint against him under oath. Since it was Saturday, it could not be arranged before Monday. He tried to contact his lawyer, but his wife had already beaten him to it. I returned to the emergency room and went to see my almost ex-wife. She was having a bad day and didn't look at all well. She saw me come in, perked up, and tried to smile. Then she saw the expression on my face and was afraid of my behavior. "So, Carolyn, how long has this been going on?" She trembled and tears welled up in her eyes. "It shouldn't have lasted long, just a little fling. I did not want this." "Bullshit, Caroline." I rushed to her and stopped a few centimeters from her face. "Gidget is not mine, Junior is not mine, and Marisa is not mine. I am 17 years old. We have been married for 17 years. You can calculate everything yourself, bitch. You are supposed to be one of the best sellers. Why, Carolyn? Why? Why?" The crying almost immediately turned into a grin as she wiped her eyes. "Because I can. You're supposed to be a detective, you figure it out. I can get as many men as I want, and you have no idea." I looked at my soon-to-be ex-wife, and something inside me died. I looked straight through her, and the cold expression on my face told her a lot. She seemed to have aged centuries before my eyes and shrank all over. "Oh, God! What is wrong with me?" I took her hand and led her to our car. I put her in the passenger seat, got in myself, and drove to her parents' house. She stared blankly out the window until we drove up to their house and stopped. "What are we doing here? I want to go home." "People in hell want ice water, bitch." I got out, pulled her out of the car, and led her to the front door. I rang the doorbell, and when it opened, her father was standing there. "Frank," I said, "your daughter needs to stay here for a while. I'll be back tomorrow to explain everything. She just left the emergency room. Take care of her, please." He looked at me as if I had 2 heads. I turned and walked away. I turned off my phone and went home. I walked into my children, and they looked at me. "Where is Mom?" "It's with your grandparents. She will be there for a while." I briefed them on what happened. omitting some details. They accepted it, after some crying and sniffling, and said they understood why I did what I did, but they couldn't understand why she did what she did. Join the club, I thought. I went and got reports, tapes, photographs, surveillance reports, and receipts for everything I had on her. I prepared 4 packages of everything, omitting only the DNA test results. I called a lawyer and pulled the divorce trigger. I asked for an injunction based on the police report and the rape case. I put the DNA results in the lawyer's packet, then went to the asshole's house and talked to his wife, Lorna. I apologized for the noise, and she kindly commiserated with me about the general chaos. I gave her the bag I had and told her to use what she wanted. She was a little embarrassed and thanked me. I left and went home. I stopped by her parents and gave one of the packages to my future ex-father-in-law. "Your daughter is somehow abnormal. You need to get her some help." I turned and left. I went home. The next day we went to church and then to Denny's for breakfast. I kept my cell phone off all day and then all night. Monday morning I came to work and got time to charge the asshole. I showed up at the courthouse and was present at the arraignment. His lawyer played the consensual sex card and said there was no rape. They presented statements from 2 women from the company. The judge wasn't sure she liked what she heard, but said she was dismissing the charges with prejudice so he could face more charges if things change. He turned, saw me, and grinned. This did not last long, as whoever had his wife as an advance arranged to be notified of the divorce on the way from court, along with an injunction. I grinned as I walked away. Not quite level yet. I returned home with copies of the rape report, the police report, and DNA results from the rape scene. Guess who my poor little daughter's father was, biologically speaking? I was on the phone with my lawyer when someone knocked on my front door. Now only one person I know knocks instead of ringing the doorbell. Of course, I opened the door to my current brother-in-law. Anthony was Carolyn's older brother, but only by about 3 years. He had his own construction company. There were rumors that he had ties to the mafia. A few years ago, his son had some trouble with drugs, and I pulled some 99% legit strings and got it all sorted out. Then we included him in the program, got him in order, and now he is in his 3rd year of seminary and doing well. Needless to say, I was his favorite brother-in-law, so it was probably not a social visit. Tony pushed past me and was greeted by my children. They loved him and his wife, Teresa, and their 3 children. He pulled away from the hug, turned to me and said, "Back porch." We walked up to the back porch and he turned to me and said, "What the hell is going on?" Carolyn is not doing well at Mom and Dad's house, and Dad is furious. "Did she tell you anything?" "You threw her out." Then she became evasive and didn't want to talk anymore. This was right after Dad showed her the literature you gave him. "What's happening? Have you looked at any of the things your father had?" He wouldn't let me. Sigh. "Your sister cheated on me for 17 years. None of my children are biologically mine. She spread her charms everywhere. I don't know who Marisa's or Junior's father is. Most likely she doesn't know either. Gidget's father is her current boss, Arthur Dash. She also has a sexual illness, gonorrhea, and is pregnant. Not from me. Your father has everything I have, except the rape testimony and the police report. But my lawyer has everything. She will be notified of the divorce this week." He sank into a chair and looked at me desolately. "No chance? From what? Would you do this?" "No, I understand. They dropped the charges against the shithead, that's what I call him, and he was abandoned by his wife, who also has everything your father has, thanks to me. I didn't mean to be cruel to your parents, Tony, but with the attitude your sister has now, I didn't want them to get the wrong information, and she needs serious psychological help." "I understand, just a little shocking, that's all." "And how do I feel?" We talked for a while, and he got up to leave. "So what are you going to do with the shithead?" he asked. "I don't know. Everything I do will come back to haunt me immediately. I know what I want to do, but no offense. She's not worth going to jail over." He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it. You're still part of the family. This won't come back to haunt you. I won't hurt my sister, but he'll get his. This will equalize our rights." "Brother." "Tony, don't do this. I said. What to do? He asked. He turned and left before I could say anything else. So on Thursday, my wife was notified of the divorce at her parents' house. She passed out, and they had to take her to the emergency room. She stayed in the hospital for about a week. Then she returned home to her parents' house. Her father came to talk to me. Couldn't we fix this anyway? He asked. Didn't you see what I gave you? Yes. But obviously she made a mistake. Error? I shouted. Scratching the car was a mistake. Forgetting to enter the receipt was a mistake. Having sex with someone else for 17 years, getting pregnant by another man, passing him off as her husband's child, and stopping sex with him was not a mistake. I'm just glad the kids were at day camp when I ran over their grandpa. I calmed down and told him to make her sign the papers. I'm done with her. He was not happy with either one or the other, or us. Cool shit. An interesting thing happened. She was notified about 3.5 weeks ago, and 3 weeks ago, the little shit disappeared. He didn't show up to see his lawyer with his wife. It turns out that for tax purposes, she was the majority owner of Dash Realty, so she really wasn't concerned, and amended her claim to show that she was abandoned. The divorce proceedings continued, but now it will take a year. Carolyn was 2 months pregnant, so we would have to wait another 7 months to complete everything. So we waited. As the case dragged on, her lawyer tried to get the settlement changed. She wanted more. She said that she has the right to more. I offered to keep the house and pay her 10% compensation. She needs to keep her retirement savings and our savings account. No visits except for 1 weekend every 2 months with her parents. No male or female companions present, not to mention Marisa. She didn't want to see her. Her lawyer was against almost everything. I asked my lawyer to make an appointment. I arrived at my lawyer's office half an hour early and loaded the DVD into his projector. I took a cup of coffee and sat down. She appeared with her lawyer. My lawyer introduced himself, and Carolyn held out her hand. I know who you are. I don't need to get to know you. Her lawyer said we should be civil and gave him the look of my best cop. He choked slightly. They started bargaining. After 4 hours, they worked everything out but came to nothing. I vetoed everything and even withdrew a few things. Then she exploded and said I was being unreasonable. I dropped the hydrogen bomb. Okay. You answer one question truthfully, and I will change my mind. I pressed the start button on the DVD player. The disc began with Carolyn and the asshole leaving the Holiday Inn. It was from my police car's dash cam. She had never seen him and did not even suspect his existence. This continued until she pulled out her blue lace panties. I stopped him and turned to her. Her face was ashen gray, and her jaw was pressed to the table. At the meeting, right, Carolyn? Tell me, where are the anniversary panties, my loving wife? A, where the hell are they? If you don't sign this just the way it is, we'll go to court, and everything will become public knowledge. Sign this! She cried, grabbed a pen, and signed everything. Her lawyer was stunned as she grabbed her purse, stood up, and her water broke. She howled. We called an ambulance and took her to the hospital. I made sure that my name as the father was not listed on the birth certificate. She gave birth to a boy weighing 3 kilograms. My lawyer sued for DNA testing, and voila, it wasn't my baby. Not only that, but it wasn't the shithead's kid either. She also cheated on her lover. The divorce took place, and I was finally free. I immediately became very desirable in the singles market. My daughter told me that I was considered pretty. My son told me that I had to be careful, otherwise you might be attacked. I went to visit my brother-in-law and we had a couple of beers. Finally, I asked him if he knew what happened to the shithead. Who is this? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Never mind it, I said. I dated a few, but my heart wasn't in it. About 2 years later, Tony and Teresa had a party at a bar. Everyone was invited, including my ex-wife. The kids stayed away from her and the guy she brought with her. However, her little boy was adorable. My daughters literally attacked him. My now 18-year-old daughter brought a young man with her to the party. He was fine, but was still being tested. In fact, I liked him, but I didn't tell her about it. The guy who came with her mother was drooling all over my daughter. I saw, but I didn't want to embarrass my daughter with any actions or words. He continued to creep up on her, and I was just about to intervene when her young man friend joined her. Hey, honey, what's going on? Mind your own business, boy. The young lady and I are having a conversation. Oh, don't mind me, he said. I was just trying to keep her from hurting you. His hand slid to her thigh and then to her ass. Take your hands off me, she said, looking him straight in the face. Hey, you know you like it, don't... She punched him in the throat and grabbed his right arm. His thumb flew back, snapped, and a scream caught everyone's attention. I don't have my mother's morals, you bastard. Her friend grinned. This is my girl, I thought. Her mother came up and screamed, What did you do? My brother-in-law, who had seen and heard everything, came up and said, I think it's better for you two to leave. After they left the party, everything went quiet. Then someone new appeared. My sister-in-law ran up and hugged a striking brunette, about 170 centimeters tall, with petite breasts and legs from hips to ankles. She had a cute girl-next-door face, and her eyes were brown with gold flecks. She was stunning. At least that's what I thought. My son came up and poked me in the ribs with his elbow. Put your eyes back in place, old man. He grinned. What are you talking about? I asked. Then my sister-in-law brought the beautiful lady to us and introduced her. Kurt, this is my sister, Angelina O'Malley. Oh, shit. All the good ones are already taken, I thought. She just moved here. She has a 10-year-old son, she is a lawyer, and wanted to start over. Her husband was killed in Afghanistan. Teresa looked me in the eyes and said, I told her everything about you. Maybe you can help each other. Angie looked at me and said, We can try. A sip. A Boughton policeman. He has a wife with whom he has been married for 17 years and 3 children. He found out that his wife was cheating with her boss. When he consulted with a lawyer, he said there was little chance of him getting a divorce on his terms. He began to collect evidence of her betrayal and found out that all the children were not his. He and his wife went to a company party at her boss's house. There, he caught the boss and his wife having sex. He hit the boss, arrested him, and made it look like the boss raped his wife. Through long proceedings and the evidence he presented, he got everything he wanted during the divorce. 5. The unscrupulousness of her actions shocked not only him, but also her family members. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.